I stood in the grand archway of the Willow Creek Country Club ballroom, a place I had only ever seen from the outside, a fortress of their wealth. This was the first time I had shown my face to them in 5 long, grueling years. The air inside smelled thick, a cloying mixture of roasted pine, spiced duck, and the metallic tang of old money. It was a smell I associated with humiliation. My mother, Catherine, drifted toward me, her body encased in dark green velvet, her diamond necklace flashed like a warning light. She pulled me into a painfully tight, brittle hug, her nails digging sharply into my arm, a silent, immediate punishment for my very existence. "Eliza, darling, you came. How brave. That suit is interesting. Do try not to embarrass us, Eliza." Her whisper was a sliver of ice in my ear, sharp and cold. "Your father's investors are here." She released me and glided away toward a cluster of women her age, her smile snapping back into place, leaving me standing alone and conspicuous in the entryway. My father, Mark, stood by the massive roaring fireplace, one hand holding a glass of dark liquor, the other clapping our golden child brother, Julian, on the back. He was telling a loud, booming story to a circle of men in identical, expensive tuxedos. He glanced at me, his eyes moved right over me, registering nothing, a flicker of annoyance perhaps at the interruption, and then he turned back to his audience. I was a ghost in a $10,000 suit, but a ghost nonetheless. I kept my hands steady at my sides, my breathing even, my posture perfect. I had prepared for this. I had known this would be difficult, but the immediate, casual chill of their dismissal was still a shock, a physical blow I had to absorb without flinching. Julian, radiating an arrogance that only unearned success and lifelong pampering can provide, finally broke from his father's circle. He walked to the small podium near the string quartet, tapping the microphone. A high-pitched, agonizing squeal echoed through the ballroom, causing the 400 guests to quiet down and wince. He cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping the room, arrogant and proprietary, until it landed, deliberately, on me. I was his target, and this was his stage. Friends, family, honored guests. He smiled, a wide, predatory grin that didn't touch his cold eyes. "Thank you for coming to our annual Christmas gala. It's so wonderful to have the whole family together again." He paused for effect, letting the lie settle, his eyes still locked on mine. "As many of you know, my dear older sister, Eliza, has been, well, she's been lost to us for a few years now." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of whispers and sidelong glances. I could feel the stares, a heavy blanket of pity and curiosity wrapping around me, trying to suffocate me. I stood my ground, my expression a carefully constructed mask of neutral calm. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm, like a war drum. "We were so worried, weren't we, Mother?" Catherine, who had glided back to his side, placed a perfectly manicured hand over her heart and nodded, a perfect, tragic portrait of maternal concern. "So, I did what any loving brother would do." He leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to a confidential, conspiratorial tone. "I hired a professional to find her." He gestured to the back of the ballroom, a grand, sweeping motion. "I wanted to make sure she was safe. I was so worried. I thought she might be homeless." He let the word hang in the air. A poisoned dart, a public execution. I saw my mother and father smiling openly now. A cruel, shared triumph. This was the plan. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The public confirmation of the failure they had always predicted for me. The daughter who had dared to say no. Julian's smirk widened. He signaled to the back of the room, a sharp, commanding flick of his wrist. "Mr. Marcus, if you would." A man in a crisp, dark, professional suit walked forward, looking neither left nor right, his face impassive. He held a thick, heavy, leather-bound report, embossed with a gold seal that flashed under the chandeliers. I recognized him, of course. I had met with Mr. Marcus 3 days ago in my own, much larger, office. I had reviewed his findings. I had paid his exorbitant, but very well-earned, invoice. My family didn't need to know that. Not yet. Julian took the report with a theatrical flourish, like a king accepting a treaty, a trophy. He held it up for all to see. Now, let's see what our little homeless nobody has really been up to. He opened the cover, his eyes gleaming with malice, his shoulders squared for the killing blow. He cleared his throat, preparing to read the first page, eager to destroy me. His smile froze. It didn't just fade, it shattered, collapsing in on itself. His face, which had been flush with arrogance, turned a blotchy, pale white. His eyes scanned the page frantically, his brain refusing to process the words. He stammered, a choked, pathetic little sound. There seems to be a typo. He laughed, a high-pitched, nervous bark that fooled no one. This is wrong. Marcus, what is this? Mister. Marcus remained silent at the back of the room. His job complete. The entire ballroom had fallen completely, utterly silent. The only sound was the faint, mournful string quartet, which was now trailing off, one violin at a time, as they too sensed the drama. My father, Mark, ever impatient, stalked forward, his face a mask of annoyance and rage. What is it, boy? Don't fumble the punchline. Give me that. He snatched the heavy report from Julian's trembling hands. He adjusted his glasses, annoyed, and began to read the executive summary aloud to his investors, who were watching with keen interest. Subject: Eliza. He stopped. His own voice caught in his throat. He reread the first line. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a confusion I had never seen. He continued, softer, to himself. But the microphone, still live, picked up his disbelieving whisper. Net worth. Estimated $48 million. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, sucked the air from the room. Mark continued, a horrified automaton unable to stop, his voice now cracking. Primary asset. Founder and sole owner of Apex Real Estate Holdings. He was shaking his head, as if to deny the words he was reading. Asset list includes. He trailed off, his eyes wide with a dawning, animalistic horror as he looked around the very room he was standing in. Asset list includes full ownership of this property, the Willow Creek Country Club, purchased 2 months ago. My mother, Catherine, let out a small, strangled sound, like a dying animal. Her champagne glass, the one she had just picked up, dropped from her nerveless fingers, the crystal shattered on the marble floor. A sound as sharp and final as a gavel striking down a verdict. Julian looked like he was going to be sick. He was backing away from the podium, shaking his head, his hands flapping uselessly at his sides. No, that's not right. That's not what I paid for. I calmly walked forward, my heels clicking in the vast, terrible silence. I picked up the microphone that Julian had abandoned, wiping the faint sheen of his sweat off with my thumb. It's true. My voice was clear and cold, amplified throughout the room, reaching every shocked, silent corner. I bought this club in October. I looked at the stunned, shattered faces of my parents and my brother. The world was spinning for them. But I was perfectly, terrifyingly still. I was seeing a different room. 6 years ago. The gray, drizzly afternoon in our old kitchen, the smell of bleach and my mother's disappointment. Julian's genius crypto-based social media app, a plan he had drawn on a napkin, needed seed money. My parents, in their infinite, blind wisdom, had decided where it would come from. They demanded I give my entire $20,000 college fund to him. It was not their money. It was my inheritance from my grandmother, the only person in this family who had ever loved me. It was all I had. I refused. It was the first time in my life I had ever said no to them, and the shock of my defiance was like a physical force in the room. Julian is the future, my mother had said, her voice flat. You are just... you... My father's face had turned a deep, mottled purple. He grabbed my arm, his fingers biting into my skin like steel clamps, and dragged me to the front door. My mother and Julian just watched from the dining room, their faces passive, as if watching a mildly interesting television show. A daughter who says no is not a daughter at all. His voice was low, guttural. Get out. He threw my suitcase onto the wet lawn, the rain starting to soak the fabric. He slammed the door, the click of the deadbolt echoing in my ears, sealing my fate. I was 22 years old. I worked 3 jobs. I was a waitress at a 24-hour diner. My shoes perpetually sticky with spilled soda and my hair smelling of grease. I was a cleaner in a massive, soulless office building, scrubbing toilets at 3 in the morning, my hands raw. I was a coder, taking on tiny, agonizing website jobs for local diners and dry cleaners, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. I slept in my car for the first 7 months, a 1998 sedan with a broken heater. I saved every single penny, my anger and my grief a burning furnace that kept me warm through the freezing nights. I used my small savings, just $9,000, to put a down payment on a foreclosed, dilapidated house. I did the drywall myself, my knuckles bleeding through the cheap gloves. I learned plumbing from online videos, flooding the bathroom twice before I got it right. I flipped it. Then I flipped another. Then a small, 4-plex apartment building. Then a commercial property. Now, standing on the stage, I saw Mr. Marcus, the private investigator, step forward again. He looked directly at Julian, his face a mask of professional disinterest. Mr. Julian's request was twofold. His voice was devoid of emotion, a simple statement of fact. He was very specific. He asked me to verify his own financial statements, to impress his partners. I believe that was the quote. My gaze drifted to the table of investors, the men my father had been so desperate to impress. They were no longer watching me. They were watching Julian with a new, reptilian focus. Mr. Marcus continued. That information is also in the report. Page 20. Julian, who had been frozen in a state of catatonic shock, suddenly lunged, a desperate animal sound tearing from his throat. That's private! You can't! He scrambled for the report on the podium, but Mr. Marcus was too quick. He simply turned, walked 3 steps, and handed a second, identical copy to my lawyer, Sarah, who had just entered through the side door and was waiting patiently. Sarah was immaculate in a dark blue suit, the picture of lethal competence. She took the report and walked to the microphone I had just left. Her heels clicking with purpose, she opened the report to the correct page, the paper making a crisp, ominous sound. Per Mr. Julian's request, a full financial audit was conducted. Her voice was clear, loud, and devastating. Julian's startup is insolvent. He has been committing wire fraud, diverting a total of $1.8 million of investor funds to online gambling sites and various offshore accounts. Furthermore, he, Mark, and Catherine. She looked up, pausing to meet the eyes of all 3 of them, a predator marking her prey. Are co-conspirators in the embezzlement of Eliza's grandmother's trust fund, which they illegally and secretly liquidated after Eliza was exiled, using it as the initial seed money for this fraudulent entity. The investors, the men my father had been trying to impress, exploded. The civilized veneer was gone, replaced by the raw, primal fury of men who have been conned. Thief. Fraud. You used my pension fund to pay your bookie. One of the men, a large, red-faced individual, grabbed Julian by the lapels of his tuxedo jacket. My money, you little... They converged on him, their shouts echoing, as Julian cowered, babbling about misunderstandings, his lies pathetic and thin. I stepped back to the microphone. The shouting stopped. My mother asked me not to embarrass them tonight. I looked at her, her face a mask of ruined pride, her body trembling, her eyes filled with a new emotion. Fear. My father, who had been called a ghost, was now as white as one. My brother, who had called me homeless, was now surrounded. They stole my inheritance. They threw me away. While I was sleeping in my car, they were cashing my grandmother's checks. While I was building an empire, they were building this. A house of cards. I let my words sink in, a poison they couldn't spit out. The truth they had spent 6 years denying. And today, I bought their debt. The bank was happy to sell. Sarah stepped forward again, holding a new set of documents. The foreclosure papers. The bank, which I am now the primary lien holder of, is foreclosing on their home and all their assets, effective immediately. They have lost everything. Julian was weeping now. Fat. ugly tears of pure self-pity. Snot running down his face as the investors threw him to the floor. My father stood like a statue, a man carved from gray ash, broken and empty. As for this club, I turned to the team of uniformed security guards I had hired, who were waiting just outside the archway, looking bored. Please escort Mark, Catherine, and Julian off my property. They are trespassing. Their membership, and all associated privileges, are revoked. My mother, Catherine, finally found her voice. It was not a whisper. It was a shriek that clawed at the air. Raw and animalistic. You can't do this to us. Eliza, please. She stumbled forward, her hands outstretched, her perfect velvet dress now wrinkled. We are your family. I looked at her. My heart a cold, hard, heavy stone in my chest. I felt nothing but the vast, empty peace of a battle finally won. You answered that question yourselves 6 years ago, when you chose a thief over your daughter. Get them out. I turned my back as security grabbed their arms. They were dragged out, Catherine screaming my name, Julian sobbing like a child, my father utterly, finally silent. His empire of lies turned to dust. The next day, all three were arrested by federal agents for wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. I watched the news report from my penthouse apartment, sipping coffee and looking out over the city I now owned a significant piece of. I liquidated their entire estate, every painting, every car, every last trace of their stolen, hollow life. With the proceeds, I created the Get Out and Win Scholarship, a multi-million-dollar fund for young women in real estate, specifically for those who have been disowned by their families. I never saw them again. My new life, the one I built from the ashes of their betrayal, was just beginning. They had tried to write my story for me, casting me as the failure. They didn't realize I was the one holding the pen. If you have ever felt like the outcast, the one who was told you were nothing, I want you to share your story below. Remember, the best revenge isn't just living well, it's owning the building they're living in. Subscribe, and watch the next story in the playlist. You are not alone.